Alright, let's go. Blue Peacock. Nuclear mine. One weapon of war that you may think needs no revisions is that of a typical landmine. You step on it, and it explodes. I mean, what more can you ask from a tool meant to kill your enemies? Add a little foliage, make them last for years to threaten any future inhabitants, and you have one unbeatable weapon of war. But apparently, exploding your enemies at point blank range wasn't aesthetically pleasing enough. No, what's more in fashion and frankly more fun is getting to nuke your enemies individually and inflict them with a terminally ill cancer. This is what the Blue Peacock, a 7.2 ton plutonium powered weapon with an explosive yield of 10 kilotons, was meant to do. This weapon was intended to be used in the Cold War by the British Army against the Soviet Union. The British Army would bury the devices at strategic points in Germany through which the Soviet tanks might rumble. Once triggered, the nuke would explode and vaporize anyone within a mile radius. Those who survived would be dismembered and severely burned by the heat of the bomb. Even if you managed to evade the blast, you still have to contend with the nuclear radiation. The mine also required a heat supply to remain functional during winter temperatures. And no joke, the best idea they had to combat this was to seal in a bunch of chickens with ample chicken feed. Their body heat would apparently be enough to keep the mine's components at a working temperature. Only one of these was constructed before the Ministry of Defense decided how foolish this weapon was. Flaming pigs. If you had a war elephant in early century BC, you were pretty much untouchable. Being on top of the largest land animal in the world is like having a mobile fortress. And in battle, a mobile fortress is basically cheating. So to even the playing field, the enemy brought out their own weapon, a pig. Now if you didn't know, elephants aren't really scared of pigs, they're just more mush under their feet. However, one thing that does terrify them is their squeal. This may be because a pig squealing is a very uncomfortable sound to hear, and having huge ears only amplifies this. Unfortunately, they couldn't make the pig squeal on command, so the next best option was to just set them ablaze. Upon hearing the wretched sound, the elephants would run in terror as far away from the creature as possible. And if you were the unlucky bastard that happens to be in its way, well, like I said, more mush under the feet. The elephant would lose control and trample allied troops that were on ground level. They will be squashed under the feet of the beast as the army gets disorganized. This all happens as flaming pigs squeal in the background and the enemy approaches to attack. What a sight to behold. The Pangen Drum. This weapon was designed to destroy beach defenses on the shore of Hitler's Atlantic Wall during World War II. The device consisted of two large rocket-powered wheels conjoined by an explosive center. The weapon was meant to be launched by a landing craft and accelerate up the beach. It was then supposed to blow a hole in the seawall or explode upon contact with any other concrete obstacles. Unfortunately, it did none of that. Upon testing this new toy on the beach, it would constantly veer off course. Simultaneously, it would send rockets flying in the air sporadically. If you were near this 10-foot machine of death, you would probably be run over or burst into pieces if it detonated. Or if you're not so lucky, a rocket would explode close enough to you to blow your face off. This machine never made it past testing as it nearly killed the testers constantly. The last test involved the testers jumping for their lives to get out of the way of AWOL rockets. At that point, they realized it would do way more harm to troops than any of their enemies, and the idea was scrapped. Gauntlet Dagger. This menacing tool was used for close-quartered hand-to-hand combat. It was meant to feel like an extension of their arm and give the wearer a more natural feel. It was basically a gauntlet made from light sheet steel with a blade protruding from the end. It also had a handlebar on the inside so the tool wouldn't slip in battle. However, this tool wasn't as practical as its more sleek, efficient cousin, a knife. It weighed about 2 to 3 pounds and could only be used to punch the enemy. This would inevitably throw you off balance and leave you open for an attack with, say, I don't know, a knife? However, if you were the one dealing the blows, the damage would be severe. You would be a walking hole puncher giving out copies of ass whoopings to anyone that dares. The enemy would be bombarded with deep wounds that could not be treated faster than the loss of blood. Every strike would be like driving a metal stake into their bodies with the power of a punch. When this weapon worked, it worked well, but when it didn't, it was more of a hindrance. For this reason, it was abandoned and not used seriously in war. Flet. Now this weapon, although very simple in design and principle, is very effective at disbanding enemies. This weapon actually isn't dumb and is rather dumbed down. A fléchette is a type of ammunition that resembles a dart and can be shot out of a gun, but the fléchette that we care about is the one that is dumped out of a plane. These weapons were used during the First World War and caused devastating effects before aerial bombs were more widely used. They were typically stored in boxes with 250 to 501 payload. One of these payloads could span over 500 square yards. Once these little metal missiles were released, they gathered an increasing amount of speed. By the time they reached the ground, they were fast enough to pierce light armor, wood, or even bodies. These flechettes would come down like metal rain and pierce through enemy helmets with ease. They would rip through their skin and tear their bodies to shreds. And because the flechettes are just aerodynamic nails, this all happens silently. The only sound you'd hear would be the sound of them hitting the ground like torrential downpour, and then, nothing at all. Anyway, that's the whole video. Thanks for watching, stay cool, and deuces.